Hello there. This is an introduction to the CAE from me, Paul Gallantry. It's just an outline of the Cambridge CAE examination. So, what is the CAE? Well, it stands for the Certificate in Advanced English. It's a test of your English and it's equivalent of C1 on the Common European Framework, which shows language proficiency. The Common European Framework is a way of saying that people's ability in English is at different levels, and this one shows that you're a very high user. You can use this exam for university entrance, among other things, and it's the equivalent for academic purposes of about 6.5 to 7.5 on IELTS. That's the International English Language Testing System. So if you have this exam, you could actually apply to a university and say that you have this qualification. Well, what happens in the exam itself? There are actually 5 parts to it. You have paper 1, which is the reading, that's 1 hour and 15 minutes long. Paper 2, the writing, which is 1 hour and 30 minutes long. Paper 3, the English in use, which is 1 hour. And paper 4, the listening, that's about 40 minutes. And you take those 4 papers on the same day. For example, in the summertime, it's usually the second week in June that you take those papers. You also have paper 5, the speaking. That's about 15 minutes long and is often held on a separate day. For example, in my institution, we do these first 4 papers in mid-June, and then we usually have the speaking on the Saturday following it. Okay, well, what happens in each bit? Well, in reading, paper 1, there are 4 texts that you have to look at. You have 550 to 850 words per text, and there are 34 questions. Now that might seem a lot to do in 1 hour and 15 minutes, but it's actually quite achievable. Where we say 4 texts, we mean 4 questions, and in fact you can have smaller texts within those. The texts themselves come from newspapers, magazines, journals, fiction and non-fiction books, leaflets, brochures, and things like that. And they haven't been modified at all or very much, so you're looking at genuine language. In terms of scoring, you get 2 points for correct answers in parts 1, 2 and 3 and 1 point per answer in part 4. It's important to remember what kind of points you can get because of the time limit. Although it's easy to answer all the questions, it's thinking about which sections do you make sure you answer during it. Once you've done the reading, you move on to the writing. And this one has 2 parts. So you're doing 2 pieces of writing in 1 hour and 30 minutes. Part 1 is compulsory. That means you have to answer it. Part 2, you have a choice of 5 different writing types. So if you're not very good, for example, at, let's say, writing an article, there might be something about writing a report or writing about a set text. So you have this choice, and it means that you have more opportunities to write about things that you'll be good at writing. In terms of the length, now they're actually not that long, and one of the big problems that people have in the advanced exam is writing too much. In part 1 you're writing between 180 and 220 words, and in part 2 about 220 to 260 words. You do not want to go over that limit because then you start getting penalised. And the exam itself is very carefully structured so that you should be able to answer it well within these word limits. The task types themselves include articles, contributions to a leaflet and brochure, letters, reports, proposals, reviews, essays, competition entries, set texts and memos. So it's quite a variety of different things you can use there. Part 1 very often is some type of transactional letter. That means that you have to ask for action or request action or give recommendations, something like that. Once you've done that, you go to English in Use. Now, English in Use has 5 parts and has 50 questions, and it covers quite a few things there. There are different task types. You have a multiple choice close. Close just means gap fill, so you're filling the gaps. You have an open close, which again is another type of gap fill exercise, but with a different focus. In one you have just a choice of words you have to fill there. In the open close, very often that's looking at grammar words like relative clauses and conjunctions and so on. You have word formation where you have to create the words. from a list and put it in a text. You have gapped sentences to complete, where you have to choose the correct word to complete three or so sentences. And keyword transformations, where you're changing a sentence using a given word or phrase to make it fit and say the same thing but in a different way. So often it's a test of things like register and so on. And the reason we do this is because it helps us understand what you know about the elements of language in context, so how words fit together basically. And in terms of points, you get 1 point per answer in parts 1, 2 and 3, 2 points per answer in part 4 and up to 2 points per answer in part 5. And spellings must be correct. In fact, spelling isn't such a big issue in the writing paper, but in the English in use is expected. In the listening, you have 4 parts, and there are 30 questions in this. You listen to each part twice, which maybe might make you feel a bit more relaxed about doing this. People get very nervous about this exam, but you do listen twice, so there is opportunities there. What you hear, though, is different things. It can be announcements, radio broadcasts, it can be telephone messages, speeches, talks, lectures and anecdotes, or if it's listening to dialogues, it can be interviews and discussions. And you do have a variety of accents. These aren't really hard accents. You're not going to have anything that's a really difficult one to understand, but you will hear things like a generic Northern English accent, American accents, Australian, Scottish, Welsh, and so on. And there's 1 mark for each correct answer in that. Once you've done that, you're going to, I should point out as well that part 2 spellings must be correct there. Once you've done that, you go to the speaking, and in the speaking exam, there are 4 parts. Part 1 is general introduction idea. It's to really relax you into it. So it's general questions and it's a two-way conversation between you and your partner in the exam, and it's kind of the personal questions, things like where are you from, what kind of job you do, etc. Part 2 is visual prompts. You are talking about some pictures based on some visual and written prompts, and you talk for 1 minute and then give a comment to your partner when they do the same. Part 3 is much more of a discussion type thing. You've got some pictures and you have to discuss the question you're given as well. And it's a problem-solving task. It's about agreeing and disagreeing. Part 4 is a general discussion. You widen out the discussion based on Part 3. So if the pictures in Part 3 are about, let's say, different types of work, you might then talk about employment or what makes work pleasurable or not, and so on. And that pretty much is it. It's not a very hard exam, but it's one where you have to be accurate and fluent. And if you bear the prompts in mind and know how to answer the questions, you stand a very good chance of passing it. As for the scoring, well, each paper carries equal weighting. That's 20%. And you need to get 60% to achieve CAE grade C. You don't get individual marks given for each paper. You can't pass or fail each one, as it were. They don't break it down like that. They just give you an overall score. However, you can actually fail a paper and still pass the exam. Now, it's quite possible to do that. Obviously, we don't want you to. We want you to pass with everything and get a good grade. We want you to get grade A if you can.